Members, it's time and we have a quorum, so I call to order the meeting. Item 1 on the agenda, confirmation of the minutes of the meeting held on the 25th of April. The papers have been forwarded, the minutes have been forwarded to members. We haven't received any comments. Can I invite members to confirm the minutes, please? Thank you. If there is no objection, we confirm the minutes. Item 2 on the agenda, information papers issued since the last meeting. The Secretary has issued 3 sets of papers on the meal break arrangement for Ambulancemen. That's been included in the list of outstanding items for discussion. And on the submission and posting arrangement for Clerical Grades from a staff member of the grade, we have passed on the submission to the administration. We're waiting for a written reply. So there are 3 documents which you have received. Item 3 on the agenda, date of next meeting and items for discussion. Perhaps we could invite the Secretary for the Civil Service to join us so we could discuss the meeting arrangement for the next time. Welcome, Secretary. Items for discussion next meeting. The next meeting will be on the 21st of July, Monday. (9:30). The administration has proposed 2 items for discussion. 1, consultation and extension of the service of civil servants. 2, integrity enhancement initiatives for civil servants. For the first item, at the last panel meeting, it was agreed that there will be a public hearing at the next meeting. We're now inviting deputations to come and give their views. For these 2 items, if members agree, they will be put on the agenda for the next meeting. Secretary, nothing special from you? No? Okay, then let's agree to do so if there's no objection. Item 4 on the agenda, 2014 to 2015 Civil Service Pay Adjustment. Can we first invite the Secretary to take us through the paper? And after the discussion, after the presentation, there will be 5 minutes for each member for questions and answers. Secretary, please. Thank you. Mr. Chairman, on the 17th of June 2014, at the meeting of the Executive Council, it was decided that the civil service pay for 2014 to 15 would be as follows. For civil servants in the upper salary band and the directorate, the pay increase would be 5.96%, which is equal to the net pay trend indicator for the upper salary band. For middle salary band, the pay increase would also be 4.71%, again equal to the net PTI for the middle salary band. For civil servants in the lower salary band, the pay increase would be 4.1% by invoking the bring-up arrangement, which is equal to the net PTI for the middle salary band. In arriving at this decision, the Executive Council has considered a number of factors. Perhaps I would take this opportunity to respond to some of the concerns expressed. First of all, the Executive Council has taken into consideration the 6 factors for the for pay adjustment. That is the net PTIs, the state of Hong Kong's economy, changes in the cost of living, the government's fiscal position, the pay claims of the staff size, and civil service morale. And having considered all these factors, the Chief Executive Council came to the decision I just mentioned. Some believe that if we only take into account some say that we only take into account the net PTI and not the other factors. That's not true, because the Executive Council did consider all factors before coming to a decision. And this year, it's not true that we have followed completely the net PTIs. For the upper band and the middle band, we follow the net PTIs. For the lower band, we have brought that up to follow the net PTI of the middle band, salary band, and we believe that's appropriate. Now, some said that the pay increase has not taken into account inflation. Some believe that over the past 12 months, we should take into account the composite CPIA index. Which is 5.1%. That's expenditure for household. But then our system is not linked to inflation. We believe, therefore, linking the pay increase to a particular inflation indicator is not appropriate. But anyway, we've submitted all the CPI data to the Executive Council, and that includes the CPIA, CPIB, and CPIC. And also the headline CPIA. For the CPI, see that represents the situation for over 90% of the households. We've considered the views of the lower salary band colleagues. That's why we have brought up their pay increase to be the same as that for the middle salary band. Since 2008, for upper band, the increase, the cumulative increase is 31.6%, middle salary band 35.4%, and lower salary band is the same, 35.4%. And over these 8 years, CPI inflation zone is cumulative inflation is only 28.4%. So that shows that we have taken fully into account the changes in price index. Now, third concern is that whether there's the phenomenon of fattening the top and slimming the bottom. Now, the PTI is to give an objective reflection of pay movements. The focus is not on the different ranks, but rather we would like the PTIs to reflect the pay trends for the three salary bands. And for lower salary bands, of course, we have taken into account special circumstances. That's why there's a bring-up arrangement. If you look at the situation over the 8 years for lower and middle salary band colleagues, they have received a higher pay rise than that for upper salary band. For lower and middle salary band, the cumulative increase has been 35.3%, but for upper salary band it's only 31.56%. So over the past few years, we've also seen that for upper salary band colleagues, their pay increase has been smaller than that for the other band. So there's no such question of fattening the bottom and slimming the bottom. It's fattening the top and slimming the bottom. Now, there's also another concern whether we have overlooked any needs for improvement, but it's not true. The Pay Trend Survey Committee started its work last year. It follows the established procedure in conducting the exercise, and it's been since last year it started discussion with the relevant groups to see what improvements could be made, and it was only upon the agreement of the committee that the pay trend survey was conducted. Well, some colleagues have expressed disappointment about the pay trend survey outcome, but we have actually taken on board various views in conducting the survey, and we believe the pay trend survey is a fair and transparent procedure. And finally, somebody suggested whether we should not deduct the payroll cost of increments. But actually this was the view of the relevant commission since 1989. We've been doing so. is because there was a committee of inquiry into civil service pay adjustment related matters. The fair arrangement is to deduct the in-scale increment for civil servants if our pay is to be broadly comparable with that for the private sector. This is a time-honored system. We cannot just change the system arbitrarily. But then this year, as I said, we have considered the lower net PTI for the lower salary band. That's why we have invoked the bring-up arrangement. Now, it's hoped that we could submit the funding proposal to the Finance Committee on the 11th of July, and so that before the summer break of LegCo, there will be new funds for effecting the pay adjustment. Thank you. Okay, now 5 minutes each for members. Let me read out the list. Yip Kim Yun, Lee Chak Yan, Leung Chi Chung, Sin Chung Kai, Kwok Wai Kang. 5 members so far. First, Mr. Yip Kim Yun. Mr. Chairman, I have 2 questions. For the 4 staff councils, for the 4 consultative councils, they all believe that the pay increase for lower salary bands should not be less than 5.1%. The Chinese Civil Servants Association has proposed even higher figure, but now the proposed pay increase is only 4.7%, so it's some way off from their claims, from their pay claims. So, civil servants are under increasing pressure with heavier workload. So how do you view this discrepancy between the pay increase and the pay claims? And then there are some consultative councils and unions, staff unions who have not yet come back to the negotiating table. So what has the administration done? What has the Bureau done in the past to bring them back to the negotiating table? And how are you going to strengthen the consultation mechanism so that the whole exercise could be further improved? Secretary, 2 points. About the 5.1%. Yes, some colleagues have suggested the CPIA is 5.1%, so they want an increase of 5.1%. But as I explained, our pay increase mechanism doesn't link to inflation. And the Executive Council has taken into account all the relevant factors apart from the CPIA. They've also considered the composite CPI. And in the past 7 years, as I explained, for civil service pay adjustment, when compared to the composite CPI or CPIA, the increase has been higher. So it's not the case that every year we have to go by the CPI, but we should look at it, look at the whole picture. Now, Mr. Yip Kim Yun pointed out some colleagues have not yet joined the Consultative Council or the Pay Trend Survey Committee. Well, these members may not have attended meetings of the Pay Trend Survey Committee, but we continue to send them the relevant papers and seek their views. And after this survey exercise, we will continue to liaise with them, and we will continue to invite them to rejoin the committee. That's something we will continue to do. Follow up, please, Mr. Chairman. Now, I asked just now what has been done to bring them back to the negotiating table. Can I ask whether you have tried anything to achieve that?
As I mentioned, even some staff weren't involved in the meeting. All the relevant papers were shared and circulated, and members are welcome to give their views on the 2014 civil service pay adjustment exercise. And members of the staff councils were invited to give their views, and other members were also consulted. And we have met the various staff councils on their views on the pay trend indicator and pay adjustment. And we will invite them back again this time, and we hope they can be engaged and give their views on the survey. And we have seen some improvements this year. Are you satisfied, Mr. Yip? We should have a mechanism to solve these problems. Will there be any repercussions? And how do you address such issues? Do you mean asking them to return? I don't think this would have any negative impacts. I'm referring to those who are not returning to the meeting table. Yes, if they decide not to take part, of course, there would be impacts. We have different consultative councils, and I'm sure the integrity of the survey wouldn't be compromised. And of course, if we can engage more people, then it would be more credible. Mr. Li Xiaoyan, the Labour Party is very unhappy with the government's lack of respect to the workers' unions. As the largest employer in Hong Kong, after consulting the labor unions, the Hong Kong government is ignoring the comments. Certain consultative councils have accepted the proposals because they have staff who are in the upper band, and the police force council was extremely disappointed, and the discipline services consultative council is disappointed with the pay adjustment for the middle and lower salary bands. And the MOD1 council is very disappointed with the pay offer for the lower salary band. And all the consultative councils were disappointed with the offers. And under the International Labour Convention, which is acceptable under the Basic Law, in Section 151 of the law, you promise to undergo a collective bargaining with the labor unions. But this is not what you did. And after the consultations, you are not listening to the plights of the workers. You are completely ignoring their views. Of course, you would say that you will consider the issues. You will consider the comments. But we have no way to know what you are thinking. And as you can see from the results, everyone is disappointed with the pay offer. And the most disappointing point is that the government is taking the lead to fatten the top and narrow the bottom. Should the government merely follow the trend in the private sector? Does the government have a job to do in terms of narrowing the poverty gap? And the CPIA is 5.1, and you're basically following the CPIA index only. And overall speaking, you are worsening the poverty situation in Hong Kong, and you're giving the impression that the government is fattening the top and slimming the bottom. And the upper bands can get 5.96%, while the middle and lower bands can only get 4.71%. So that's my two questions. We understand the expectations of the workers. They are hoping for a better pay offer. This is perfectly understandable, but the EXCO has to consider different considerations. And different factors have been taken into account before coming up with this decision. I don't agree that we are fattening the top and slimming the bottom. the idea is that our mechanism should be comparable to the private sector. If we deviate from this mechanism, then the PTI exercise would be affected. If you remember, last year the upper band staff received a relatively small pay rise, and if you look at the past 7 or 8 years, the pay adjustment for the upper bands was lower than the middle and lower bands. So it's important to have an objective mechanism in place to assess the adjustment. So, well, I expected this answer from him, Chairman. Over the years, you have been ignoring the comments of the labor unions, and you're saying that you are following the pay trend indicators, and you are ignoring the plights of the workers, and so this is a total lack of respect to the workers' union. This is something you cannot address. Next, Mr. Leung Chi-Chang. We are discussing the civil service pay adjustment at LegCo every year. So I think that this is we are only meeting for its own sake, but nothing can be changed. Last year, you said you've factored in six criteria in pay adjustment, and questions have been asked whether the morale of the civil service has been considered, and the answer from the secretary was always yes. And last year, the pay rise for the middle and lower bands were higher than the upper bands or even the directorate levels. But this year, the middle and lower bands are receiving a lower rise than the upper bands. So my question is, would morale of the civil service be affected? So I don't think you have factored this in. When you consider pay adjustment for the civil service, how do you assess morale? Have you conducted any surveys to find out whether civil servants are supportive or are supportive towards the pay offer? And would some civil servants be unhappy, and would some of them rather take up a job in the private market? So perhaps I will ask the secretary to respond. Do you have any scientific figures to gauge the morale of the civil service? First of all, morale is one important criterion every year in the civil service pay adjustment exercise, but other factors are also important. Manpower is very important, and other factors like work arrangements, communication with the frontline staff, these are all possible factors that could affect staff morale. It's very difficult to quantify morale, so we can only use our best judgment. If the needs of the civil servants are addressed, then I think the situation is satisfactory. And this year, for the lower band civil servants, they get an adjustment of 4.71%. And this decision was made partly because we have considered their morale. It's very hard to say that to say how much percentage points staff morale is worth. Sometimes when I approach civil servants, I have the feeling that it's very difficult to work in the government because they are always being accused, whether it's electrical staff or other staff. After the year 2000, the civil servants no longer receive pensions, and this really affected their morale. And you have to quantify staff morale. This is possible. Are you going to carry out any surveys to gauge what civil servants think about the government? We have no plans for such surveys. And right now, on average, more than 50 people are fighting for a place in the civil service. So, and the wastage is relatively low at 3 or 4%. And we would hold regular meetings with the heads of bureaus and departments, and they would let us know of any possible problems. And on the pension arrangement after the year 2000, I think this is a universal trend, because it's a burden to the government, but the employers' contributions, the government's contributions towards MPF is higher than that of private market employers. Mr. Sin Chung Kai. I have no problem with the general mechanism, but I have a question on the issue of sampling. What are the employers you choose when you conduct the survey? Last year, you told us that because of adverse financial situation, the pay rises were lower. The pay rise for the upper bands were lower last year. The survey was relatively tilted towards financial institutions. This year, after negotiations with the staff sides, have you made any changes to the sampling? We have made some adjustments. We want to be consistent. We don't want to survey one batch of companies last year and then another batch of companies the next. So we might make minor adjustments, but we have to be consistent. We have to maintain consistency. The biggest change we made this year is to incorporate the additional pay. And the results are positive for all 3 bands this year. So this reflects changes in the private market. I have a follow-up question. In terms of positioning, are you adopting B75? Are you adopting this standard of B75? You have, to the staff side, agreed, yes. In terms of representation, are you adopting a ratio of the population provided by the staff sides?
Well, if Mr. Sin would like further details, I could ask Ms. Chen to supplement later. First, before each pay trend survey is conducted, the Pay Trend Survey Committee would call a meeting to decide what companies to be incorporated for the upcoming survey. if the staff side has any questions on some of the companies, they would raise so at the meeting. There will be discussion, and then the meeting would decide what to do for the upcoming survey. Now, for companies selected, we basically follow a few main economic activities and reference data collected by the Census and Statistics Department, for instance, financial services, transportation service, and so on. So the ratio for companies in different industries would mirror the ratio compiled by the Census and Statistics Company as a department for the different economic activities. But then, of course, there may be some variation. There may be a few more companies in one sector and a few less in another. Well, this is an issue that's been discussed by the Pay Trend Survey Committee in the past few years. And the staff side and the management have come to a consensus. That is, if there is a higher or lower number for certain companies, then they will make adjustments in a progressive manner. In other words, if there are far too many companies in one sector, they won't just take out all the companies in one go and remove all the companies in one go and replace them with new companies. No. Between years, there has to be some sort of consistency or continuity for the companies involved. Otherwise, there may be wild fluctuations in the data collected. But then maybe some companies will eventually be phased out, or there were new companies joining the survey. Then that will help to balance out the drastic changes. The Pay Trend Survey Committee believes that's the best way to do so. And in the long run, the data would be the most reliable. And every year they will review the situation. Thank you. Mr. Kwok Wai Kong. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the pay adjustment this time round is relatively close to inflation, but as some members pointed out, the Mod 1 Council chairperson, Ms. Lee, submitted their views. That is for the mid-lower band civil servants, their pay increase is lower than the inflation, that is CPIA. But the administration is just saying, no, we won't look at the CPIA, we'll look at the composite CPI. The composite CPI covers 90% of the population in Hong Kong. But then there is a high Gini coefficient in Hong Kong. There's a wide wealth gap in Hong Kong. And all of a sudden, you go for this composite CPI, which covers the big bulk of the population, and you say that for the composite CPI, the increase has only been 4.4%. That's all you're saying. But then for the lower band civil servants, they suffer the most because the daily necessities have seen the biggest price hike. For luxury goods, maybe the prices haven't gone up so much. So what you say actually really hurts the feelings of lower band, salary band colleagues. They wonder how much you take care for the lower salary band colleagues. According to what you said, actually you don't care much about them. You say as long as you get the figures right, and as long as the pay increase is higher than the composite CPI, that's it. That you can't just pay attention to everything. No, I don't think that's a good answer to give. That's the first point. Secondly, some members asked a good question. For the police force council and civil service council, they haven't yet rejoined the Pay Trend Survey Committee. So why did they leave last year, these two councils? Because they believe that is the PFC and the DSCC, is because they believe the Bureau has not considered all, and the Executive Council have not considered all 6 factors. If you could come up with a reasonable and convincing approach, and you could tell these two, now for the discipline services police, of course, they the most obedient, they follow orders. But then today, they have not yet rejoined the survey committee. Why? Because they don't think that you have considered all 6 factors. Now, it's only the Bureau and the Executive Council who claim that they have considered all the 6 factors, but we don't see that to be the case. You know, for the figure, the digit after 0.00 something, you haven't touched it. 5.96, 4.71, you follow that completely. You just follow the net PTI completely. So how can you convince people that you have considered all the other 5 factors, as if those other 5 factors don't weigh very much? That's the impression anyway. So how can you tell the 2 councils who have led the committee to say that the other 5 factors have been considered? How can you convince them to have faith in this mechanism again? Now, this is an annual exercise, as Mr. Leung Chi-Cheung's pointed out. So it's better if you bring them back to the committee earlier than later. So when can you do that? Secretary, number of points in response to Mr. Kwok. First, about the price index. I must stress again, all data, including the composite CPI, CPI-A, CPI-B, CPI-C, all the data have been submitted to the Executive Council for their consideration. We haven't just singled out a particular price index, not just the CPI-A and not just the composite CPI. So, as I said, we do take into consideration the needs of lower salary band colleagues. That's why we have invoked the bring-up arrangement. Over the past 8 years, for lower salary band colleagues, they have an accumulative pay increase of 35.4% compared to the CPI-A. Over the same 8 years, the cumulative increase has only been 27.4%. As you know, CPI-A may not necessarily be higher than the composite CPI. Sometimes it could be lower than the composite CPI, so the CPI-A varies during different periods. So we can't just focus on one particular CPI. The 6 factors. Now, the Executive Council has to consider all factors before coming to a decision. They look at the whole picture. It's not the case that they just look at the net PTI and then they add something to it, but rather they will look at the whole picture and then they will come to judgment on what is the best arrangement. This year, for the lower salary band, we have not followed the net PTI. We have invoked the bring-up arrangement, so it's not the case that we just rigidly follow the net PTI. And that goes to show that the Executive Council has considered all the 6 factors. And, of course, over the years, for most years, we have followed the net PTI. In some years, we may not have done so. That exactly shows that there's flexibility in the mechanism. If given the prevailing circumstances in the community, the economic condition and so on, there's a need to make a special arrangement, the Executive Council will so decide. So the Executive Council has considered all factors and would do so too in future. Okay, I think all members have asked their questions. I understand the administration is hoping that at the FC meeting later on in July, the funding proposal will be submitted. I hope members agree. I suppose members agree they could do so. Let's move on to the other item, item 5, employment of persons with disabilities in the civil service. Secretary, can you take us through the paper? Thank you. Just 2 points, Mr. Chairman, briefly. We are an employer that offers equal opportunities. So we have tried our best to eliminate discrimination against persons with disabilities. We have an open and fair recruitment principle. We look at the performance and so on of all the applicants. We consider all aspects of the applicants. We have also measures to make sure that as persons with disabilities apply for civil service jobs, they could compete on an equal footing with able-bodied applicants, and they enjoy equal opportunities as able-bodied applicants for all civil service jobs. Now, we have implemented certain measures. We've also got a policy. We've issued guidelines to all bureaus and departments. I won't go into the details again because I have already told you that last time. Now, most important is that we will review the arrangement from 2011 to 2013, and then from 2013 to 2014. Now, we have completed 214 recruitment exercises. Out of that, 89 or 41.46% persons with disabilities were involved, and we have adopted the selection criteria. There were 2,222 applicants, PW applicants who meet the criteria. They don't need to go through selection, and they were invited to interviews directly and to test. As for other eligible PWD applicants, 32% meet the selection criteria, and they were invited to interviews. Of the 2,222 PWD applicants, 5.3% of them actually were offered appointment letters. Compared to 2010 to 11 and 2011 to 12, that's a high percentage. At the time, there were just 94 applicants with disabilities who were offered appointment, just 3%. But now it's 5.3%. And among the 118 applicants with disabilities, there were 52 who were offered appointment even though they might not be able to perform the full range of duties of every post in the concerned grade given their disabilities. The percentage of applicants with disabilities who were offered appointment was broadly comparable to that of other applicants, which was 4%. Of course, we won't be complacent. We'll continue to promote the policy and the recruitment guidelines, and from time to time, we organize briefing for human resource managers in all BDs to refresh their understanding of the policy and guidelines and to share with them practical means to facilitate the recruitment and integration of PWDs in the workplace. So it's important that we enhance their understanding of the policy. We must also help them to help their PWD colleagues integrate in the workplace. In light of the comments of the Equal Opportunities Commission, the Civil Service Bureau will attend interviews of some bureaus and departments as observers. This is to make sure that they follow our policy and guidelines in the recruitment exercise. As at the 31st of March last year, there are 3,140 PWD civil servants, about 2% of the civil service, as you know. Whether a person suffers any form of disability is disclosed on a voluntary basis. So this figure is arrived at by counting those who have reviewed their disabilities. Any questions, please? 5 minutes again. First one, Mr. Kwok Wai Keung.
According to the figures provided by the government, they have paid attention to PWDs in existing recruitment practices. So we can see that the intent is there, but we have to see the results as well. And for the 3,401 employed PWDs employed by the government, the percentage is around makes up around 2% of the entire civil service. In countries that highlights the employment of PWDs, the percentages might be higher. So does the government intend or plan to further increase this percentage? And when assisting PWDs to be in employment, are you going to introduce equipment for them in order to help with their recruitment or work processes? And of these 3,102, 401 PWD staff, how many of them are employed on long-term agreements? First, I will respond to the percentage question. In recent years, the International Labour Union and EU both agree that a fixed quota system is not suitable for PWDs. So in other words, we won't set an upper or lower limit for the number of PWDs employed. So the key is to provide a level playing ground for PWDs. If they satisfy our requirements, we would employ them, but we won't set a fixed target, no matter it's an upper or lower target. If we have to make changes to our existing recruitment system, we will. And we would also make adjustments to the working environments in different bureaus and departments if necessary. So perhaps Mr. Mack can give more in this issue. And for the first question asked by Mr. Kwok, and for the 3,401 civil servants, are they contract staff or permanent staff? And these 3,401 civil servants were all permanent staff. And on the funding of the Civil Service Bureau to different bureau and departments, on the acquisition of equipment to aid PWDs, we can share a few figures. In the last 4 years, the figures rose from about $50,000 to more than $100,000. And this year, we will introduce a new computer system to aid PWDs. And after the system is implemented, the new staff with PWD, the new staff who are PWDs can take advantage of this system. Can I ask a follow-up question, Chairman? The government must take the lead in promoting the recruitment of PWDs. The government is saying that they don't have indicators for the employment of PWDs. This is rather passive. If the government is taking the lead, you might not not necessarily have quotas, but you must have a vision. You must have an ideal level of employment for PWDs. Otherwise, you cannot say that you are dedicated in promoting employment for PWDs. And it really depends on how much effort the government is prepared to put in. According to the government, the figures were on the rise. And the government seems to be doing something, but this is not enough. In recruitment exercises, the situation is different every year. We have to see, we have to look at who the applicants are. The most important point is to provide a fair playing ground for everyone, and we cannot set targets because it depends on the number of applicants, which is out of our hands, and we cannot control whether the applicants are suitable candidates. in the last year or two, we have more and more staff. We have more PWDs being employed. We hope this is a positive trend which would continue into the future. From our experience, the key is for the HR personnel at different departments to understand the needs of PWDs in the workplace, and appropriate measures should be provided to these PWDs. I have a question too. And for the 3,401 PWDs employed in the civil service, the number of staff with intellectual disability was about 18 or 19. There weren't any new recruitments in the last few years. And in the past few years, the police force hasn't employed any PWDs. Is that the case, Mr. Mock? Mr. Mack. We can go back and look at the figures in order to respond to this question. But on the policy of encouraging PWDs to apply for civil service jobs, we have done a lot. In the last few months, we have done a lot to promote measures to bring convenience to PWDs. And we can, on the first level, we are carrying out internal promotion, and we are providing internal guidelines to make sure that everyone understand the policies. We have organized 2 briefing sessions to reinforce this important message. And second, we are working with the Labor Welfare Department, to the Labor Department, to promote measures to help PWDs. We are drawing up guidelines with the Labor Department so that PWDs who like to apply for government jobs can understand better understand their privileges and points of note. And they can better understand the government's measures during interviews. We would not assign different weights for different types of PWDs because it would be unfair. We would treat them all fairly and equally. Any other questions, Miss Emily Lau? Apologies for being late. For the number of PWDs hired by the government, the figure has been mentioned in paragraph 7, and the percentage of 2% is really low. The administration is against any kind of quotas. But even if you don't use quotas, you should be more proactive. The percentage has not increased in the past years, and it has even dropped. A lot of PWD organizations are really dissatisfied with the situation. Have you consulted any of these institutions on how the government can manage to recruit more PWDs? For Hong Kong Disneyland, they have a partnership scheme. Of course, you have to invest more resources. You have to assign buddies for these PWDs to build up their confidence in the workplace. So perhaps the government can learn from Hong Kong Disneyland. For the airport authority, I asked I asked the chairman of the AA how many PWDs they have. The answer from a few years back was 1, and now the figure seems to have increased to 4. But why is the situation so bad at public bodies? Compared with other countries, we are way behind. Can we take a leaf out of other countries? And can we learn from other cities who are doing well on this front? And why are we not doing as well as we should? You mentioned a few points. First, on the overall promotion of PWD recruitment. The Labor Department introduced a scheme, the Talent-Wise Employment Charter Inclusive Organizations Recognition Scheme. At the Civil Service Bureau, we would do our best to promote PWD employment in the government. However, we have to ensure that all recruitment exercises are carried out in a fair and transparent manner. And for all applicants, whether they are PWDs or not, they have to take up the same work. So we have to be fair. So for PWDs, we have introduced different measures, such as a new computer system, hearing aid, and so on, in order to help them in the workplace. So these are some of the positive efforts we have done. For the number of PWDs employed, the percentage of PWDs has increased slightly, so we are going to continue our work in the same direction. Can we adopt the buddy scheme, a similar scheme as Disneyland's buddy system? They are a big international firm. Can their practice help the Hong Kong government employ more PWDs? Can we learn from other organizations? Have you taken reference from other companies? I don't have any details or information on hand on what Disneyland is doing, but we might not have so much flexibility in the Hong Kong government. Some PWDs might not be able to fulfill all duties stipulated in the post, but we would still be accommodating. I think the point is not to introduce a buddy scheme for PWDs, but rather we would introduce measures to bring convenience to the PWDs. And we have indeed looked at other countries and cities, and we are going to introduce some new measures. And one example is a recently employed PWD needs assistance when he needs to go to the bathroom. So we have assigned the staff to an office which is closer to home, and but a buddy scheme is rather difficult to implement from our side of view.
Now, Mr. Chairman, of course, Disneyland won't be so nice to hire someone just to accompany a PWD, but rather they work together and the other colleague would just help out the PWD colleague. The whole purpose is so that we could hire more PWDs. Well, I asked whether you have looked at the good practices in other places. Maybe they are hiring more people than we are, and how they do it. So have you tried to learn from the experience? Can you share that with us? And why is it that in Hong Kong we can't do it? And have you also talked to the PWD bodies? Have you sought their views? Maybe there's some way they could help you to increase employment opportunities for PWDs. Have you done so? Have you tried to sort the views of PWD groups? Now, with the Labour Department, we have a collaboration scheme. There is a publicity leaflet that we are now producing. It's about helping persons with disability to apply for government jobs. The purpose is, of course, to promote our policy to PWDs. So if they're interested, they can apply for government jobs. And the publicity leaflet will be uploaded to the internet, and then through NGOs, we will also disseminate this message to different groups so they know about the whole recruitment process and what facilitation measures there are to help them apply for government jobs. We hope that this message could reach to more people who could be potential applicants. So that's what we are doing now, and very soon the leaflet should be ready. And as I mentioned earlier, within the government, especially for human resources colleagues, they know that it's important that they know very well that the whole policy and the mechanism, there are guidelines to follow. We have a lot of sharing sessions to disseminate the message to frontline colleagues who do recruitment. So that's important. Second point, after we have recruited PWD colleagues, we use various means to help them in terms of posting, if necessary. We could take into consideration the special circumstances in posting them to an appropriate post. And what we also do more than that, as the secretary mentioned. Maybe for some PWDs, certain offices would be more convenient to them. We will try to post them to those offices. And most importantly, it's not about disseminating the message to PWDs. It's about sending a message through the entire civil service. That's why we hold many sharing sessions every year. And it's important for people to understand the message of integration. And we will continue with all such efforts. You're only producing the leaflet now, my goodness. We've been talking about integration for all these years, and you've been to the UN to report several times already. It's only now that you are producing the leaflet. Maybe you're so far behind. We believe the SAL government is in a position, and it could to hire more PWDs. You could more than afford to do so. So I hope that's why I hope you would work with NGOs. The secretary mentioned if the staff need certain things, their family members may help them. It's the same with Disneyland, and they may not be able to work the full hours from 9 to 5, and then you have to accommodate them. It's not about being open and fair. You should seek views from the Equal Opportunities Commission. I'm not saying that if you hire a PWD, you need to hire someone else just to look after him. No, that's not the case. Just that perhaps help could be extended to the PWDs, because once they have confidence in what they're doing, they will be able to realize the potentials. So you can approach the NGOs. They are in constant touch with the PWDs. They are able to help you, especially for those who are visually impaired. They have complained oftentimes that many times that in the past they were just hired as telephone operators, but now they're no longer hired as telephone operators, because now telephone operators do more than just taking calls. They have a lot more tasks to attend to, and these people are now denied the opportunity. So there are posts suitable for the visually impaired or for others with disabilities, but you just wouldn't hire them. That's why they come to us to complain a lot. Secretary, I hope you've heard Ms. Lau's views. Mr. Kwok Wai Keung has raised his hand. Oh, okay, let me sign up for a second round. Mr. Kwok Wai Keung. Well, I think persons with disabilities have the ability to work. They want recognition too, and they want to prove that they are able to work. Now, the Secretary has said that there is not a quota. Well, I'm sure many are disappointed, but I think you haven't done enough to promote employment of persons with disabilities. You don't even have a figure in your vision. So let's find out then from other ways how much the government has done. I asked about the ratio. I asked about the resources you've plowed into the exercise. Now let me find out more information now. From 2008 to now, there are about 3,200, and now there were 3,200. Now there are 3,400 PWD civil servants. So just an increase of about 100. What about the wastage rate over the year? Is it the case that there are more people leaving? That's why there are people trying to take their place, or is it the case that few have left? So if in that case, that means over 8 years, there's only been an increase of about 170 extra civil servants with disabilities. Is that the case? For the 3,000 odd PWD civil servants, let's assume the wastage rate is 0. They've been imposed all these years. Is there any promotion for these staff? What about their prospects? Because many have been in this post for a long time, they should have accrued quite a body of experience. Now, the promotion prospects, I want to know if these are the same as for other civil service colleagues. Secretary, wastage and promotion. Can I also answer Ms. Lau's question? First, about the leaflet. It's a new initiative. It's just to enhance what we're doing. The Labour Department has a selective placement division. Is already helping persons with disabilities to apply for jobs, including civil service jobs. So it's not something we're only doing now. We're just trying to consolidate what we've been doing. And another point about the visually impaired. Of course, there are other things we're doing, like scanners, braille, handheld amplifiers, color, electronic color amplifiers, and so on. So we have various devices to help them do their work. For telephone operators, or I think you're talking about telephone operators for the government hotline. Now they don't just take a call, they have to answer many questions. So there may be some difficulties for the visually impaired because they may not be able to meet fully the work demands. Wastage rate, I don't have the information at hand. I'll provide it after the meeting. Promotion prospects, we won't have such information. Why? Because in the course of in considering promotion, a person's disability should not be taken into account at all. So that's why we won't keep information on the point of considering the disability. So if a person is promoted or otherwise, his disability is not the consideration at all, unless it's a job that he can't perform due to the physical disabilities. But in general, and for promotion, disability must not be a factor. Well, yes, I know you cannot consider the background of a person in whether or not you're promoting him. But you should have some figures at least. No, we don't have any figures, actually. Next, Mr. Lee Shuk-yan. I'm also asking for figures. 3,401 civil servants with disabilities, not many more than in the past. I don't see any progress or improvement here. If you are committed to making improvement, you shouldn't just be happy with 2% strength. Right? Now, in the past 2 years, you have resumed recruitment. For the total number of the civil servants with disabilities, I don't see any breakthrough in any way. Why? Is it because you haven't done enough? Or is it that the departments do not keep an open enough mind? So that's why in the final tally we hardly see any progress. 3401. It's possible 1 in 3 has become disabled because of work injury. I don't know the figures, of course, but perhaps there are some PWDs who have retired and then you just replace them, so that's why there's zero growth. And then there are some PWDs who have not yet retired. Maybe that year you hire a few more of them in preparation for retirement, so that's just an increase of 100. It's a meager increase, and we don't see any commitment on the part of the government to hire more PWDs. Now, there's another scheme which is rather strange, as if you're not doing it much anymore. A Sunny Way program. Name is appealing, but it started in 2006. The Sunny Way program. How much sunshine did you deliver to how many people? Do you have any figures? I'll take the second question. For the first question, I will defer to Mr. Mack. That is about the Sunny Way program. Now, second question of Mr. Lee, how many persons with disabilities work in the government? Well, or some become injured. It's possible some do not have a disability, but eventually they have a disability on the job, and that has to be taken into account. And there are other cases too. Some colleagues may not consider themselves to be disabled because, as I said, the declaration of disability is entirely voluntary. So the figure may not give a full and accurate reflection of how many PWDs are working in the government. But there's another indicator we could look at, as mentioned in the paper. In the past 2 years, we have seen an increase in the number of appointment letters issued to PWDs. In the last 2 years of recruitment exercise, some 180 applicants were offered appointment, but at the end, some of them did not accept the appointment offer. That's still an increase over previous years, and of course we must continue with our work, especially at the departmental level. We believe if the departments could better understand the recruitment arrangement, it will help in the promotion of policy. So we hope they will learn more about the policy and the guidelines, and then let's see what progress we could make. Mr. Mack, about Sunny Way program. Yes, on the Sunny Way program is about allowing young PWDs attachment opportunities. Is for them to try out the job setting, and whatever they learn from the attachment, and this could be used as they work for the government or the private sector. Well, this program is initiated by the Social Welfare Department. Different departments are involved. Maybe each year about 20 departments take part in the program, and maybe there are about a few dozen jobs available for matching under this program. Now, we would like to do more publicity about this program. We're now working, talking to various departments to see whether we could find more such job attachments for matching with the PWD, so more would have the chance to try out the relevant job setting.
You have not mentioned any figures, so I can imagine that the figures are very low, and so it proved you're only offering 30 jobs a year. So perhaps that comes to about 3 jobs per department. You only have the government. We have so many civil servants, but you can only offer 3 jobs per department. Can you provide some sort of indicator, and can you do more and provide more jobs under this program? We are already promoting this program. The number of jobs offered is not completely in our hands because they are proposed by the relevant departments. And it's the departments who decide how many jobs they would like to match. But we can certainly try to do more by liaising with the SWD. And indeed, under this program, a lot of young people can benefit if they decide to take up civil servant posts in the future. This would be valuable experience for them. Ms. Emily Lau in the second round, please. So transportation is one important consideration when you go looking for a job. So possibly some PWDs might not be able to reach the workplace. For services provided by Rehabus, a one-way journey costs $180. If you have to use Rehabus, the cost is very high. Have you talked with the PWDs to see if they have any difficulties in this area? Or are you saying that we have to be clear and transparent, and we would treat everyone the same way? Have you done anything in helping them get to work? Chairman, we have upgraded the relevant officer in charge, and the commissioner for rehabilitation is now at grade D3. So I'm wondering if the government has anything to say on this. When we recruit PWDs, of course, we would not consider transportation. But if the applicants has difficulty reaching the workplace, we would try our best to arrange an office which is closer to his home. For Rehabus, I don't have the figures on hand now. I can work with the Labor and Welfare Bureau to obtain figures. So one of our objectives is to facilitate access for PWDs in Hong Kong. And for Rehabus services, as far as I understand, as long as you make a reservation ahead of time, then it won't be a problem. Chairman, if I have to go to work every morning, I would reserve services from Rehabus at 8 o'clock every day. If we have people who need Rehabus services every day to get to work, can you arrange the services for them? The secretary said this is not under his scope of work, but if you don't provide the right conditions for PWDs to go to work, how can they make ends meet? How can they go to work? Perhaps the secretary is not the only person responsible, but nonetheless, this is a situation, a problem we have to solve. The government has been promoting Rehabus for years, and they have not done much in recent years. And yet, you can only provide one round of service every day. A lot of PWDs cannot go to work because they cannot find the right public transportation. These PWDs wouldn't apply for the civil service because they cannot get to work. Do you understand this problem? As far as I know, I used to be responsible for rehabus. Most PWDs have no problem getting to work, but I will work with the Labor and Welfare Bureau to look into the latest situation. So please come back to us on this issue. For the second question, I forgot what your second question was. Collaboration with the LWB, right? Said collaborating with the LWB for rehabus. So what has the Commissioner for Rehab done? As far as I know, this post is not approved yet because of filibustering, right? Yes. So everything is held up at the Finance Committee. You can make online applications for civil service posts. They don't have to physically be here. If a PWD indicates that extra assistance is required, we would provide them. If there are any difficulties in transportation, we would also try to accommodate if possible. If the application applies for a clerical officer post, then it's the situation is relatively easy to deal with. The government should include should mention such things in their papers to show that they are doing something. For example, the number of applicants who require special assistance. I don't know, but some people might be reluctant to disclose such information. So this is something we have to ask the Equal Opportunities Commission. If we know that they need assistance, we should offer help. I'm not sure if privacy would be compromised, but we can look into that. But the point is, we must understand whether they need help. And we have to look for answers to help these PWDs. For instance, assigning them to nearby offices. So I can go back and ask all the social welfare bodies to see whether the current rehab services are adequate. I have one point to add. I understand the concerns, so I would go back and hold discussions with the LWB. But one of the objectives of rehabers is to allow PWDs to go to work. We cannot always assign PWDs to work at offices close to their homes, but we would do our best to allow them to get to their workplace. So we'll further discuss with the LWB and get back to members. The members have provided a lot of valuable opinion. Any other questions from members? If not, we can conclude this item on the agenda. The next item, any other business? If not, meeting will adjourn.